Well, welcome to Ask a Doc podcast. My name is Dr. Jorge Sanchez. I am a family medicine doctor. This podcast was started in part to respond to people's concerns and questions in regards to COVID. And this isn't a chance for you to send messages. Instead of calling in to ask your questions, you can actually submit it through the Medici app. That's MEDICI. And through this app, you can download it on both Apple and also on Android to be able to submit me questions and just ask your doctor about certain things. And on this podcast, today we're going to talk about COVID and the symptoms in children. And we'll go. I'm sure that someday when COVID becomes kind of a thing of the past, we'll move forward and talk about a lot of other different concerns or questions. And I do really want to talk about food and nutrition and how to eat healthy, not only for weight loss, but also for cancer reduction. To let you in, I'm actually creating a book about the low cancer diet and certain foods that we can eat, how to take measures to prevent cancer and as well as heart disease, not only from with weight loss. And so that's something to look out in the future. I am trying to publish something at some point. And so I hope to talk about that. Today, I really want to focus on children and coronavirus because I've just been experiencing a lot of worried families. People will schedule their visits and really worry about children. And this is during August of 25th of 2020, where schools are reopening and there's a lot of concerns about our kids. And so look, I'll go through some questions and we'll get started. So COVID is COVID-19 coronavirus, which I hope at this point that most people know, have heard of the coronavirus. And so absolutely, I think it would be hard to not know what coronavirus is at this point. And this is a viral illness that can spread through respiratory droplets, through either coughing, sneezing, or even speaking or talking. This is a virus that has a great ability to spread because before the onset of symptoms, before somebody has cough, fever, or anything, that you can actually spread the illness before you know that you're actually having any symptoms. And so it's very difficult to contain if you rely simply on how you feel, because by the time you feel bad, you've already spread it to 20 people. And then those 20 people spread it to more 20 people, and so it's exponential in its spread. So children can develop COVID symptoms as well. And the virus does seem to be hindered by a 6-foot distancing, and if you wear a mask as well. And part of the reason is because the respiratory droplets, particularly the very small ones, the ones that we think that the virus is carried by, travels about 6 feet. And respiratory droplets float in the air, but they do fall to the ground, and they fall to the ground right before 6 feet. So if you're able to stay your distance, and particularly if you wear facial coverings and masks, it can actually slow the virus down to where it's much more manageable. And the symptoms of coronavirus in children are going to be pretty similar to adults. So a lot of it, they're going to have things like fever. In fact, children tend to fever much more readily than adults. And so you'll have an early onset of fever. You'll have some runny nose, cough, symptoms very similar to a routine upper respiratory illness. The sad part is that what can happen is that the parents can say, oh, my child gets this routinely. I really don't think that they have COVID. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that statement of where people will say, I don't think this is COVID, and because I looked online and they don't have X, Y, and Z, and therefore I don't think they have it. I think he's fine. And then what happens is that you wait a day or two, and then they develop the full onset of symptoms. So the difference between adults and kids is that children, as a general rule, do not have a lot of the chronic illnesses that adults do, and their immune systems are a lot more vibrant than ours and tend to recover a lot more quickly. And so so just to continue with the symptoms, some of them can be rather vague. So symptoms can be feeling very tired, as well as like chills and shaking. Headaches can be a symptom. Although headaches it's a rather non-specific, because particularly in teenagers, so they can develop headaches for tension headaches. They can develop headaches for migraines for other reasons. So headaches are unfortunately a very non-specific symptom. Muscle aches can be a symptom of coronavirus, so where you're achy all over, and that cannot be explained by going to play some sports and you feel achy. That's different, right? So muscle achiness for no good reason. Sore throat can be a symptom. The tricky part about sore throat is that sore throat can be strep throat. It could be also mono. Both of those things are actually ongoing throughout the year. So you can develop mono, and also you can get strep throat with sore throat. But the sad part is that you can also develop sore throat through getting coronavirus. You can also develop a stuffy nose, diarrhea, and vomiting. Those can be symptoms of coronavirus as well. And that cannot be dismissed as a regular virus or just a tummy ache, or, well, he ate something bad and that's why he's feeling this way and that's why he had diarrhea. The bad part is that during a pandemic, and when the consequences can be great as a general public health perspective in terms of spreading the illness, children are very effective in spreading illnesses, particularly like teenagers who may not take things seriously as much. Teenagers can be not trustworthy. I hate to say it that way, but like you gotta have to stay on them, right? So like in order to have them do their homework and to do the right thing, you kind of have to stay on them. Some are mature, but like I hate to say it, but like there's a lot of teenagers that are not mature and who may not do the right thing in terms of social distancing and wearing a face mask, and so they could spread it, and quite easily. Even though they themselves recover, they have infected many, many other people in the process. And so if you have any of these symptoms, if your children have any of these symptoms, then there's a potential for there being a coronavirus. Babies can develop coronavirus as well, and typically it's going to be those symptoms we described. Although with babies, they're not able to describe muscle aches. They can't tell you they have a headache. They may not be able to tell you they have a sore throat. But what they will have is difficulty feeding. They'll just eat less, and then they might develop a fever, depending on how young the baby might be. So like if the baby is like less than a month old, then a high fever really needs to be evaluated urgently by a physician, because there can be other things that can be life-threatening, not just coronavirus. Although in coronavirus in babies, we think that they're going to be just fine. And so now I talked about how kids are going to be less affected, but you don't want to assume that, because there are children who do have underlying chronic medical illnesses that can affect them profoundly. And so the things that can develop in kids are going to be heart disease. And you would imagine that adults are the only ones that develop heart disease. That's not the case. So there are some congenital, meaning that born with, like there are some types of heart conditions that you're born with. You can have like certain syndromes, like the Georgia syndrome, where you have the great vessels are in locations where it's not supposed to be. You can have congenital heart disease, which includes heart failure. You can actually be born with heart failure. You can have heart vessels that are implanted in the wrong places. There are different things that can develop, typically from syndromes. If a child has a type of genetic syndrome, whether it's the Georgia syndrome mainly, then they can have heart disease as well. Sickle cell disease, it's a disease that is inherited from one family member to another, tends to be much more of those from African descent. They can develop complications from COVID if they have sickle cell disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. This was once a disease of adults, but because of our poor nutrition in this country, because of a lot of fast food and the way that fast food and poor nutrition are easily accessible, and because of the cost being so cost prohibitive in terms of eating healthy, then obesity and type 2 diabetes, which was once only in adults, is now creeping up in children as well. Obesity can start at any point, but I end up seeing it much more like teenagers, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 8-year-olds. It's hard to see. I mean, mostly type 2 diabetes, which is adult onset, usually doesn't occur like at infant age, but it does occur. It does happen. And if your child has obesity then they are at risk of developing complications from COVID. And I've been saying this for a while now, that if there's ever a time for us to be the healthiest in our lives, it is today. It is not tomorrow or some other time in the future. Today is the day for us to actually be the healthiest we've ever been, to make those changes that we all know that we need to, and which are hard to do, because I know that it's already hard as it is during just a normal situation, but to have the stress of a pandemic, it makes it difficult, but it's not impossible. So type 2 diabetes, obesity in kids. Those with weak immune systems, and weak immune systems doesn't mean that, oh, my kid gets sick all the time, they have a weak immune system. That's not what I'm talking about. And so those who have, they had to have their organ transplants. There are kids who do have organ transplants because they received, they had kidney failure from some genetic condition. And so that's a group of people that, or liver failure, for example. So if they got a liver transplant, kidney transplant, and they're on medications that can suppress their immune system, right? That's part of being a recipient of an organ, is that you have to suppress their own immune system so that it doesn't reject their kidney or their liver. But as a consequence of doing that, their immune system is low and defending themselves against coronavirus. And so if they do develop coronavirus, they are particularly high risk. So those with low immune systems. Those with asthma, that's actually a very common condition that occurs. Asthma is a restriction of the airway, particularly of the lower airway. They develop wheezing that gets aggravated quite a bit when they have normal respiratory viruses. It also gets aggravated so allergies can aggravate asthma as well. And also in urban areas that are densely populated and the air is not clean. So inner cities, so like Houston, for example, where there's like just a lot of motor vehicles and cars that are spewing out exhaust that can aggravate asthma already. And so in urban areas where if a child has asthma, they're struggling as it is. And if they develop COVID along with that, then they can really suffer some respiratory complications. Cystic fibrosis is another chronic lung disease that occurs in kids that can cause early mortality. Type 1 diabetes is a risk factor as well. And if there's and also high blood pressure, may be at higher risk for complications. And so there are certain children who do have high blood pressure and who could be at risk. And so it's important to take those precautions. And you cannot just assume that by the way somebody looks on outwardly that they're like, hey, they're fine. There are children who are very much functional with their type 1 diabetes, or they're very much functional with their cystic fibrosis, and you would never have known that they have some underlying illness. And there needs to be a lot of compassion for those that are of the minority. These kids are the minority of the population. We have to take care of them and make policies with the school district and our local government, as well as the state government. We have to keep these people in mind and not just say, well, that's just a few kids here and there. No, I mean, we really need to take care of these kids and do everything we can as a society, as a whole, and not only just have parents be responsible, but all of us together, we really do need to be responsible to protect them as like our own community, as our own kids, as if they were our own. And by wearing face masks as adults, by telling teenagers, etc., to put masks on and to really be on our kids for sure. And so, that's something that I feel pretty strongly about. And so, Now, what are the complications if they were to develop complications from coronavirus? So if they did have an underlying condition that I just spoke about, and what are some of the things? The main thing is developing pneumonia. I mean, that is the most worrisome symptom that a child can develop. And in kids, if they're teenagers or if they're 10 years old, 8 years old, then they can just tell you that they're having a hard time breathing. And you can see, so an example would be if they're breathing like this and they're breathing every few words. So that is labored breathing. And, or if there's just, they're just going from bedroom to bathroom, or they're just going to get a drink of water and they're really struggling to breathe, or you can just tell they're just sitting there and they're not doing anything, and you can just tell that they're just having a hard time breathing. For young kids, you can kind of look at their chest wall and see if there's what's called retraction, meaning that with every breath, do you see like their ribs more? I mean, so you can see in skinny kids, you can see their ribs, but if the ribs become accentuated, meaning that you can see them much more effectively with every breath, you can kind of see like maybe at like above the neck, you can see like that their neck gets deeper with every breath and their ribs become more accentuated when they breathe in. Then that's going to be called retractions, and that can be a sign of respiratory distress and another symptom of potentially pneumonia. So that combined with fever would really be a reason to go to the hospital. If you have a oxygen meter, one that goes on your finger and you can test their oxygen, if it's like lower 90s, like 92, 93%, then that could be worrisome. And if they're like below 90, if they're like 85, then that absolutely needs to go to the hospital. So now there's some conversations about this very rare condition. There's different names for it. And so it's called the multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, or the pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome. And this syndrome looks very similar to, if you ever want to like Google it, it's called Kawasaki's disease, which is a type of vasculitis. Very rare. Kawasaki's was something that I learned back in medical school, and I've never seen it. I've only read about it and in just on exam questions as a physician. I've seen it only from there, but not necessarily in person. So, but Kawasaki's disease is vascular disease, very different in its cause, but similar to multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, which is deadly, which can cause death, and it's very sad and very awful. And so there are certain things that to look out for. So fever that lasts longer than 24 hours, along with other symptoms, which includes belly pain, vomiting, diarrhea. The bad part about that is that you can have vomiting, diarrhea without multisystem inflammatory syndrome. If it's severe belly pain, severe vomiting, diarrhea, then that's something to watch out for. Rashes, typically in the hands or feet. The one that comes to mind that's a little bit more reliable in terms of a symptom is going to be maybe the bloodshot eyes, although that can be confused for viral conjunctivitis, which is just a regular pink eye. And so that could be a symptom of either pink eye or multisystem inflammatory syndrome. Headaches is another symptom, which again is non-reliable. But probably what is really, really concerning is that if you have the constellation of symptoms, if you have belly pain, a fever lasting longer than 24 hours, a rash, bloodshot eyes, headache, along with the one that's really, really concerning, and something that you really need to watch out for, which is going to be irritability and confusion. So like not knowing your surroundings, being difficult to arouse, it's called altered mental status. Like they just look like they're out of it. They're not responsive, particularly like if they're not responding at all. I mean, if they have, if you try to wake them up and they're just like really not responding, and they're like just groaning and being irritable, or if they're confused, like they don't know where they're at, or if there's visual hallucinations, seeing things that are not there, talking kind of like nonsense and stories, and these are kids, right? So kids are not typically dramatic. They're not going to make things up. And if they're acting that way and their behavior is very different, then they really need to go to the emergency room. If they have, and also part of multisystem inflammatory syndrome is going to be trouble breathing as well. And so they need to be taken right to the hospital. This is a very rare syndrome. We really don't know a whole lot about it. And so, but those are some of the things to watch out for. And let me see if there's any other questions here. I'm looking. Oh, treatments for kids. So we don't have any treatments for coronavirus. For adults, we don't have any treatments for coronavirus in the outpatient setting. In the inpatient setting, if they're admitted, then we treat them with oxygen. There are some other medications. I think it's called remdesivir, however you say it, along with dexamethasone has been effective in the inpatient setting where kids are having low oxygen. Then that can be something. There's a new treatment out there, convalescent plasma, where you take the antibodies from people that have recovered, and you take those, extract them, and you give them to people that are fighting off the illness. That is something that I hopefully will help, and hopefully will help with kids as well. All right, how do I prevent my child from getting or spreading coronavirus? Okay, so prevention is the biggest key, and that's like with everything else: preventing heart disease, preventing diabetes, preventing cancer. So once you have it, it's difficult, but here's some things that we can do, right? So like social distancing, right? So I tell people, take a measuring stick, take like something, and measure out 6 feet. Get that really in your mind, what 6 feet looks like, because like most people think they know what the 6 feet is, but then when they go to talk to each other, it's like old habits kind of creep in, and we just start kind of migrating toward one another. It's like these magnets that are like just attracting to each other, and it feels unnatural to be that far apart. And so that's just drilling it into kids. Hey, 6 feet. Hey, grandma's here. No, 6 feet. You cannot get close to grandma. 6 feet. Be 6 feet. Kids need to understand what 6 feet is. And if not, then get it. I've been joking around about how we need to get like a 6-foot stick so that we can actually say, hey, look, this is 6 feet. So wearing a cloth mask in public. And so it's recommended for any child over the age of 2. And the 2-year-old recommendation is only because like kids that are under than 2, it's not because it's bad for them. It's just that how are you going to keep a mask on a kid that's a 1-year-old or even infants if they're sick? And so, and masks are very important, particularly if they're like coughing, sneezing, having symptoms, and so that they can prevent the spread of it. And so, because you don't know if you have it, you don't know at what point you got it, it's always important to have the mask on. And homemade masks are very good to wear. I mean, just get into sewing and start making your own. But particularly if it's a several layer fabric, I see these alligator masks, and they just don't look like they're thick fabric. It's just like one layer. These I don't want to call them I don't know. It's the ones that I think they're called alligator masks. They're the ones that go from the nose and around the neck, and they just they look like they don't do anything. And so if you have multiple layers of cloth, then it's much more effective than the ones that I've been seeing out there. And so let's see, what other things can you do? Oh, so washing hands. So like singing the happy birthday song while you're washing hands. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. And so that's about 20 seconds. So be sure to get the wrist and the fingernails between the fingers and do a really good job with washing the hands with soap. Rinse them off and dry them off with a paper towel and throw the paper towel away. Okay. So, and that can really help. And then if you don't have soap around, then you can use like a hand sanitizer, or hand sanitizing gel to clean the hands. So the gels with at least 60% alcohol work the best. It really is important to keep sanitizer out of your children's reach. So for kids that don't that might swallow it if they're really little, since the alcohol can be harmful to be swallowed. And so if your child is younger than 6, then help them with their sanitizer, right? So you want to help them actually get between the hands and the nails if they're younger than 6, because they just need the help. Also, avoid touching your face with your hands, and teaching them how to do that. And so those all can be very helpful. So what do I think about opening schools up and all that? So I mean, if you look at like, what do I expect to happen? What do you think is going to happen? I think that I think that it's going to probably go as expected with schools. Most likely, they'll open, then they'll be closed, and then they'll go for a period of time of only internet or independent school, and then they'll be open again. So I really expect that there's going to be mistakes along the way from administration, from leaders, and that we're going to have to go back and forth. So the consistency, I know, is something we all crave. Kids really love consistency. It's just not going to happen with school. I think that consistency is going to happen at home. I don't think that consistency is going to be the thing that's going to happen like at school. Like I really think that at some point there's going to be cases, and you'll see cities here. There'll be some city here, some cities there that will close their schools, and then there'll be some that reopen. And what my greatest concern really is about the multi-generational families where within a household you have mom and you have grandkids and then you have the ailing the kind of elderly grandmother who's living with, so they're all in one house. That is the predicament that I am most concerned about. Or say the situation where mom was recently diagnosed with breast cancer and she's starting chemotherapy, and her son is in high school, and they don't have the resources or the money for somebody to watch them, to make sure they're doing their school online. And so and they're and then the mom is still having to work. And so she's getting potential exposure from both routes, right? From work and from being in public, and also her high school kid who just trying hard to not get COVID. But high school kids, I just don't think they're going to do the right thing. I just don't believe that. I think that there'll be some immature high school kids. Not all of them are the same, but I think there's going to be some immature, really stupid high school kids. They're going to not wear a mask or sneeze and cough on people, and then spread it to others and bring that home to the family. And there'll be somebody in the family that is immunocompromised, that has obesity, diabetes, if they're on chemotherapy for some other disease like breast cancer, and that's gonna be what causes the death in the family. And it's horrible, because to think that's that happened, then there's this huge guilt from the teenager. It's just a whole bad situation altogether, right? And so kids are going to be kids. They're going to do stupid things, but we should probably provide an environment that is safe for them. And I think it's just an awful predicament. I think what would I do if I was in the situation? At this point, there's no real good answers. There were plenty of opportunities initially when the pandemic first started. I think that opportunity is really gone, to have put a lid on this and to be in the places that, for example, South Korea. South Korea is in a really good place because they took dramatic measures immediately. I think they freaked out when there was 4 people who had coronavirus. I mean, we didn't freak out until, some of us still are not freaking out about it, And so I don't know. At this point, I don't think there's any real great solutions. I think that we're going to have this back and forth kind of occurrences, opening schools, closing schools. With restaurants, I think they opened, in Texas at least, they opened the bars and then they closed the bars. And I think there'll be this confusion, there'll be this lack of communication. And I think the schools that will do well are probably the ones that have their crap together, that communicate well with parents, who are really good with communication, who have the resources, and we can talk forever about how it feels unjust for some schools to have resources and some schools not to, and so I can't solve that problem. I really wish it feels wrong. I feel that it should just be school and not good schools and bad schools and rich schools and poor schools. I wish it was just school, and that we could all be in this together. But sadly, that's not the way here in the United States. That in other countries it's different, in Europe countries, but we decide that this is the way we're going to do it, and which it's going to cause a lot more problems in those who are poor, than those that are rich. And so that's my general suspicion about how things would go. The other place of concern that I have is in colleges. In the colleges is different. You're not going to have, like, high schools, they're all kind of crowded together with, like, whenever you change classes. And so they're trying to take, I've heard some measures of where the teachers move rather than the classes move, but you can't really do that with all schools. So it's not going to be like the crowded lunch hour. It's not going to be that's not the issue with college. College issue is basically football. I think that having, how do you do, like, so football is a time to where you start having parties at Texas A&M University. So like I live in College Station. At Texas A&M University, like, college students they pay a lot of money, and it ain't for education, right? I mean, it's for, like, going to football games and go to parties and, to be, to get drunk, a lot of them, right? And so, I'm not going to confess any details about my own personal life when I was younger. Let's just say that I knew some people who did that, right? And so, but, like, it's like the college thing. And when you're like 18, 19 and you just, like, want friends, that's all you want. And you just want to fit in and do what other people are doing. You don't do that with social distancing, right? How do you talk to a girl at a party at 6 foot distancing? It ain't going to happen. It's just not. And college students, they're going to want that experience. And so we already have, like, stories where sororities, our parties are happening, and that there's, like, COVID parties where, like, who can get the COVID the first, like, who can be the one who can actually get COVID the first and actually invite somebody who's known to have COVID as a challenge. And, like, somehow it just seems like stupidity is a way to climb the social ladder when you're young. I don't know why. And I never got that, to be honest with you. Like, that, although I've done some stupid things, that was just due to my own volition. It was not, I never understood the social hierarchy to where you achieve social hierarchy based off of, like, how risky you were and how stupid you were. That's my greatest concern, because the university is going to regulate behavior on campus. You can't regulate behavior when they're off campus, and it's going to happen. And so, like, basically it's going to be like, what do you expect is going to happen? Like, will we be surprised when, like, when what hits the fan? I'll just say it, when shit hits the fan, will we be surprised? Are we going to be like, well, that was a surprise? No, we're going to know exactly, like, well, of course, of course we're going to have this huge surge of cases. And the students came, they came into town this past week. And so we're kind of looking at, so usually it takes about 14 days for any one event to produce a consequence, about 2 to 3 weeks. So when you just look back when school started, and then you count forward 2 to 3 weeks, and you're gonna basically see the consequences of it. Like, I really hope I'm wrong, but I hate to say it, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong in this. And so you can do what you can do on a small scale. I think becoming educated about the situation, learning, like, if you listen to my podcast, I think now you know a little bit more about the situation. And if you have the capability to do online schooling, that's what our kids are doing. And so it comes down to finances and resources. So, like, we took the dramatic measure of, so, like, yes, I'm a physician, and I it's like, it's not anything hidden. Like, that I make a decent income, and that helps a lot. To me, I'm like, I want to go extreme. So I want to go even further than that. So we sold our house. I put it on the market, and we moved into a rental, and it's much more affordable. It's a smaller house, and, like, we definitely downscaled our lifestyle. And so we're spending less money on housing. I am riding my bike to work, and that's crazy. It sounds crazy, like a doctor would, like, hey, Dr. Sanchez, you already had a ghetto car to begin with. Sorry, I use the word ghetto. I hate the word ghetto. You already had a cheap car to begin with. So, like, why are you, like, now biking to work? Well, I still want to like be in a financial situation that would allow us to take whatever event comes our way. Like if for some reason, if the waves of the economy will force us to downsize, I'd rather downsize beforehand than downsize after the fact. And it really much puts us at a place to where we can do internet school. And I understand that there are people who can't do that, particularly the single mother family, who, particularly if they're working 2 full-time jobs and they're already like renting and they can barely get by, and they're like on a month-to-month salary, fixed income. Like, I get that. And our heart goes out to you, and we want to support you. We want to like help you find resources, and at a 6-foot distance help you financially, and to give and to donate. And we all need to do that and support people that are in tough situations. But if that's not you, and you know that you're like, well, I have a subscription to Netflix. I have a subscription to the gym that I never go to. I have, X, Y, and Z, like there's certain things we can like cut out of our finances so that it allows us the ability to be flexible, so that if one parent needs to quit their job and stay at home, then that you would make the drastic measures to do that. Because if it comes down to it, and one of your kids has diabetes or obesity or heart disease, and you're in a bad spot, like, and if you have the ability to downsize, like you just start excluding, like maybe sell your car, and instead of having a note on your car, like just sell it and get a used car or bike to work. And there are things we can do. Well, another one is just selling stuff. Like we've been selling all of the stuff we don't need. Sell our crap. We don't need, like, have a huge garage sale and enforce 6-foot distancing and just start selling stuff. Everything we can, whether it's a side hustle job, everything we can that would be able to downsize our lifestyle, to give us the flexibility to do the things we can do in order to help our kids out, so that if a parent needs to quit their job in order to stay home to do internet school, then fantastic, right? And so we can make changes to, not everybody can, but a lot of us could. That truck that costs about $500 a month, you could probably sell it and get like a beater car and pay it for cash, and save up the money and pay for cash and eliminate that truck. I mean, trucks are expensive to have. I would love to have one because, I want to like once a year haul something, but like it's not a necessary thing. And so like I can always just get a U-Haul once a year, as opposed to like getting a truck and just using that for once a year whenever I need to like drag stuff around. So do whatever you can financially, I think, in order to allow someone the flexibility to have their kids at home is going to be really important. And it's only temporary. Like it's only just for now. And so that would be my recommendation. I mean, I can't force anybody to do that. It's just kind of my opinion. And so, okay, I think I've kind of went off into ranting land. My wife tells me, you rant sometimes about random stuff. I'm like, no, but it's relevant, like it kind of is relevant to what's going on. I mean, there's medical and there's financial, and they kind of like overlap. I hate to say it, but they do, they overlap. And I think if we have our financial crap together and we, get out of debt and we sell and we cut up our credit cards and do the Dave Ramsey thing. If you don't know Dave Ramsey, he's fantastic. Getting on a budget and all that, then like our anxiety will be less, our stress will be less, and our health will be better. And we have a lot more flexibility to like do what we need to do if we are like financially in a good place. And so, but I don't know. I'm just a doctor, so what do I know? That's what I tell people. I'm like, hey, I'm just a physician. No one listens to me anyway, except you guys. You guys listen to me. Y'all have been fantastic. Y'all have been wonderful. And so share this podcast with other people. So if there's others who would benefit from this and, say, hey, there's my doctor. He has a podcast, and listen to what he has to say. and be wonderful. Send me questions. If you have any questions, go through Medici, MEDICI, so Medici.com. And through there, you can download the app that allows you to search by my last name. You can search me, Dr. Jorge Sanchez, out in Bryan area, in the Bryan, Texas. And you could be able to submit questions and say, hey, I got a question about this. What do you think? And you could even see me online. You can do telemedicine visits with me, And so if somebody is like really needing a doctor and they're like, hey, I know this doctor, and in fact, why don't you download the Medici app and you can probably text them right now. And I think that telemedicine is the way to go for sure. So also, if I'm on YouTube, be sure to share and subscribe. If you give me a thumbs up on YouTube, and hopefully you guys will enjoy these things. And y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you in the next time. Bye-bye.